This was my first experience with any psychedelic substance. A friend had sold them to me after buying them online and assured me that they were safe to ingest and that he had taken precautions to prepare them. I decided to go all out and eat 13 seeds, a very bad idea. This is way above the recommended heavy dose, especially for someone my size. I'm 130 pounds. I was very curious at the time to have an out-of-body experience with the substance and figured this would get me there. I chewed the seeds up at about 8 p.m. They have an awful taste, very strong and earthy. I force the seeds down and wait for the effects to kick in. I'm home alone and lay in my bed watching Netflix. Half an hour in, terrible stomach aches suddenly hit me, and I am rendered immobile with pain. It felt like more than a stomach ache, like a knife was in my abdomen and was repeatedly stabbing me. No other effects so far other than this pain. An hour in, the pain in my stomach starts to fade and I feel better. I watch TV for a little and everything seems to be fine. I looked over at my right arm and my arm fuses into my sheets. They are connected as one, and it was hard to tell where my sheets ended and my arm began. I remember that I have taken these psychoactive seeds and laugh at the distortion. It was relieving to know that they had started to kick in. Here's where time gets a little hard to keep track of, so the time for the rest of these posts are just estimates. After enjoying the visual regarding my arm, I relax and things start to feel a little foggy. I'm smiling a lot and feel warmth throughout my entire body, and an overall boost in mood. I try to stay up for as long as I can to enjoy my trip, but I eventually pass out. When I come to, I feel extremely out of it. I assume that it is still night and think that I could have been out for 5 minutes or possibly hours. I quickly notice that I am paralyzed for the most part. I feel so weak that I can only slightly move my neck from side to side. In the top of the room, floating in each of the 4 corners of my bedroom, I notice what I can only describe to be as oddly shaped creatures I had never seen before. They were each a different color: red, blue, green, and yellow. They didn't seem to have any bones, and I could never get a good look at their faces. I knew what I was looking at were aliens, so naturally I was terrified. Each of these beings was sitting on a chair and had a desk and computer they were attending to. All of them floating, desk, chair, and all. Then suddenly my point of view starts to shift, and before I know it, I'm looking down on my body laying on my bed. My point of view then shifts to the red being's computer monitor. It is playing a game where I am its character. It was like standing behind someone watching them play Sims, and I was their avatar, laying motionless on my bed. I can't really think any thoughts. I was just mesmerized of what I was seeing. I then pass out again. When I woke up, I was in the fetal position in the middle of my bed. My head was on fire and my stomach was about to burst open. I was in agony. Then what I had seen with the aliens sets in and the bad thoughts started. It occurred to me that my entire life could be a program made for the entertainment for some other superior being. Everything in existence could be erased, wiped out forever without a warning, if the being playing my game decided to turn off the game. My life felt meaningless and fell into a very sudden depression. I didn't want to wake up the next morning because what's the point? There may not even be a tomorrow to wake up for. I contemplated my very existence for quite some time. Then the stomach pains hit 10 times harder than before. I managed to get up and stumble to the bathroom to prepare to vomit. I dry heaved, but no actual vomit. I felt so sick and was in the worst mental state I had ever been in my entire life. I laid down on the hard tile and begged for my own death. I have never been suicidal and am generally at a good place mentally, but at the time I really wished that I was dead. I wanted to be dead so the unbearable pain would end, and because of the mental mindfuck I had just gone through. I determined that I'm not going to puke and stumbled back to my bed and pass out. I woke up the next morning with a new kind of hangover that puts regular alcohol-induced hangovers to shame. I mostly rested in bed and tried to recover. The mental toll this bad trip had on me still affects me to this day, almost 3 years later. I have taken great strides to feel normal after going through this experience, but not all the mental scares have healed up all the way yet. I never took the seeds again and don't plan to. This was my only bad trip with any drug, and have since had very pleasant experiences with other psychedelic substances. I would stick to regular doses and definitely not take anywhere near 13 seeds. This next story is a personal experience of mine, but I thought I'd share it since I'm doing Hawaiian Baby Woodrose. This is probably the worst drug I've ever done, and I don't want any of you guys to do this. This is a long story, but trust me, if you stick with it, you'll learn that this is not a drug to mess around with. I was 16 at the time of this trip. I was hanging out with my friend, we'll call him Jay, and was planning to hang out with my then girlfriend, we'll call her B. Before going to her house, Jay had recently bought Hawaiian Baby Woodrose seeds from an online vendor. I have done morning glory seeds before and knew that these were much stronger, so I was excited to try it. He crushed up the seeds in a blender, and when they were in a powder, he capsuled them up. I really don't like the smell of natural drugs like these, morning glory or kratom, so I was feeling a little sick smelling it when he put them in capsules. After they were capsuled, I decided to be super dumb and take 7 capsules. I don't know how many seeds that equates to, but since my trip was the most intense one ever, I'd say it was a lot. Not knowing that my trip was going to be intense, I still planned on going to my girlfriend's. But about 30 minutes in, I started to get super nauseous, and the stomach pains were almost unbearable. I thought I was going to throw up, but I didn't. It took about 25 minutes for the stomach pains to go away, but I was still feeling a little nauseous. We left his house and started to walk to the park that was about 1 mile to 1.5 miles away, so I could meet up with my girlfriend B. I was starting to come up a little bit on the way there, like a little fuzzy feeling when you get a little high from weed. We were having just normal guy conversations on the way there, don't really remember what we said. This was about 4 or 5 years ago. We got to the park and the trip started to come on. I'd say this was 1.5 hours in. Can't really say exactly how long it was, but that's a good guess. We were laying in the grass and I started to feel the grass be a part of me, and I looked at Jay and saw the grass was shifting and it looked really cool around him, so I took the picture. Looking at the picture sober was actually pretty cool too. After waiting there for my girlfriend for about 25 minutes, the trip started to intensify more, and this is where it started to get bad. She arrived at the park with her 8-year-old sister and her little friend. I was not expecting them to be there, so I was starting to freak out. When her sister came, she gave me a hug right away, and I felt like such a bad person that I took this drug knowing I had to hang out with my girlfriend. B started to figure out that I was under the influence of something and gave me a bunch of dirty looks. She pulled me aside and asked if I was high. I said no, but she didn't buy it. I started to feel more nauseous from the drug mixing in with the anxiety and stress that I was going through at the moment. My friend Jay went home after we decided to walk back to her house. After he left, I started to apologize to B and just kept on saying I'm sorry over and over again. I told her that I think I need to go home. I said I felt too sick. I called my mom and waited for her in B's garage. I kept on looking down at the ground trying to avoid contact with anyone there because I didn't want to look suspicious, but this probably made me look more suspicious. My mom finally arrived after what felt like 45 minutes, but only took probably about 10 minutes. I apologized one last time to B and said bye to her mom. My mom asked what was wrong and I said I just feel really sick, like I'm going to throw up. On the way home, I pulled the seat down and laid there and looked at all the trees and the white cloud-covered sky and thought this would be the last time I ever saw B and started to get really sad and paranoid. I put a towel over my head because I was still very much nauseous. When I had it over my head, I started to see trippy visuals. I saw a bunch of shapes and colors on a gray background like I was in some sort of mechanical factory. Then all the 4 Beatles members' heads were floating in a circle and I thought it was really cool, but also scary because I've never been this fucked up before. My mom was concerned and tried to drive home fast because she can't stand stomach issues and throwing up. At the 2-hour mark, we got back to my home and I immediately went to my room. Thankfully, my mom went to the store or something for a long time, so I had time to myself to have this trip in my room. First thing I noticed was that my room looked insane. It was very pastel in the room. Everything was super saturated, and my room felt like I added a blur effect to it. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the best I can describe it. I went to lay down because I started freaking out and looked at the time and it said 6 p.m. I started rolling around in bed doing barrel rolls over and over again, just saying, "What's up?" repeatedly, and I thought it was so funny. I was doing this for about 5 minutes. I don't remember anything other than laying there next and feeling like my body was just bones. I was feeling my skin, and I felt like it was so thin that I could seriously feel all the bones. My legs felt like how a butterball turkey looks with the wings supporting my whole body. I didn't feel like I had any feet. It felt like my legs ended at a nub, and when I was walking around, I felt like I was walking on the sides of my feet, like how when you roll an ankle and your ankle is twisted that far down. But my foot looked normal when I looked down, and my brain went back to thinking I actually had normal feet, and I started walking normal. But as soon as I looked away, it went back to walking like how it was before. Also, the inside of my mouth and teeth felt so off, like my upper teeth were going left and my lower teeth were going right or vice versa. And this started to freak me out because everything in my body just felt crooked and it was really scary. So I went back to lay down on my bed and the crooked feelings came back everywhere, so I panicked again and looked in the mirror and went back to being fine. I repeated this process about 10 times because I never knew if it was the trip or me actually being crooked. I was actually having a terrible time at this point. After I was doing that shit for a while, I looked at the clock, and I shit you not, it was only 6:10 p.m. But it felt like all that took at least an hour, so that put me into a bigger trip knowing that the time is slowed down. I don't know if time was slow or maybe a glitch happened on my phone. It was super insane. I sent my girlfriend a message saying I'm sorry and she responded, but I didn't remember what she said. I was too nervous to have a conversation. I was really just trying to isolate myself from everyone. Mostly the same shit was happening to me, and I remember going onto my phone and looking at all the apps. I have an iPhone, so all the apps have very good quality logos, and I was looking at the settings app, and the logo for it was moving. The gears they have for the app were spinning like how they would in a factory or something. I was seeing this before when I had the towel on my head on the way home, but actually looking at it looked pretty cool. Also, every time I closed my eyes, I would see massive visuals of spinny stuff of all sorts of colors, and it looked pretty sweet. I heard the landscapers outside my window doing work on the apartment complex, and I can hear everything they were saying, and when I looked outside, they weren't even close to my window. So this drug definitely enhances your senses. I had to pee really bad too, but every time I went to the bathroom, nothing would come out, and I was pushing really hard. Vasoconstriction was taking place, and that is known to happen on this drug, but I didn't know that at the time, so I started to freak out about that. It also made my dick all shriveled up. I saw my body parts were red and purple and panicked about that. I went back into my room having to pee still, but not being able to. This is a huge pain if you didn't know. I went back on my phone and got caught in the loop of looking at my apps because they look so cool. I think my mom came home around 7:30 p.m. and she didn't come in my room, so I was happy about that. I started doing the same shit of rolling around in my bed saying "what's up," feeling like all my body parts were crooked and looking in the mirror to make sure I wasn't crooked and going insane. I wanted this trip to end so bad, but I knew it was only at the peak. I knew my mom was drinking because she started to play music loudly. She played Purple Rain and I kept on hearing the chorus over and over again. Purple rain, purple rain. All I could hear was that, and I knew that there was more to the song, but the words purple rain kept on repeating and repeating. I knew it was me tripping though. I decided that it might be best for me to shut off all the lights, so I don't have to look at anything that would scare me. I went on my phone and finally clicked on an app. I pressed the Wizard of Oz slots, and this was the most fun I had playing a game on my phone. I loved the movie, so it only made it better. The graphics were really great, and they were all spinning around. I started to smile because I thought this was so beautiful. After about who knows how long, I put my phone down and started thinking of 9/11 conspiracies, and I closed my eyes and saw the Twin Towers falling to the ground. When I reopened my eyes, my mom was right in my face and said, "Are you dead?" I said with probably very dilated pupils, "No," in a very shaky voice, and then she left my room. After having a good time with the Wizard of Oz game, it got ruined by my mom when she came in and said that. I went back to being paranoid. This is when the worst part of the trip happened. I was thinking of 9/11 and also a thought crossed my mind saying, "You should hear some voices." I heard that from my own voice in my head, and I shit you not, 1 minute later I started to hear voices in my head like schizophrenia. They were saying stuff like, "Do it, kill him," over and over again, and this really started to scare me. At first I thought it was nothing, but it just kept going, and it was getting worse and worse. I covered my ears and was saying, "Please go away," but the voices kept getting louder and more scary. I was trying to lose focus of the voices by going on YouTube, but when I was watching videos I could still hear the voices. There's a video on YouTube that shows a demonstration of what schizophrenic people hear, and that is exactly what I was hearing. I was getting so scared thinking I was going to be like this forever. Remember how I said I couldn't pee? Well, after more attempts to go in the bathroom at about 11 p.m. or so, I didn't want to go and stand at the toilet and have the possibility of my mom questioning. So I laid down and was pushing out of my pee, and it finally came out after about 9 hours of not peeing. I fucking peed myself. But let me tell you, the relief of that felt so great. It took away from the voices I was hearing. I was in panic mode until 5 a.m. The trip felt like it was over because I started to feel normal and didn't feel crooked or anything. But the voices were just super loud and was on the verge of tears since I thought the trip was over and didn't know why the voices stayed. My dumbass started watching videos on people with schizophrenia, and this only further progressed my paranoia. Somehow, after a miracle, I felt tired and went to bed around 6 a.m. and was supposed to go to school, but how could I? So my mom let me stay home. When I woke up, I was so relieved that the voices were gone. I still felt high from the trip, but I'm so glad I had a day to recover. Going to school the next day, I was still kinda screwed up, but it felt kinda nice. And yeah, that's about it. The worst trip of my life. Only take 1 to 3 because I don't want anyone to experience what I went through. I do not condone the use of these seeds. I created this report to inform everyone on the dangers of what Hawaiian Baby Woodrose can bring you.